And then at the end of that year, I went traveling interrailing, and it was just some moment in the first couple of weeks of interrailing I did on my own. And I think it was the second or third city was Porto in Portugal, and I was just there playing my guitar, and I got a message like from just inside, loud and clear, "You're supposed to do music." And I was just about to start a 4-year contract in an accounting company, and it was the middle of the big recession, 2008, 2009. So it was a very inconvenient time to get such a realization, as well as it being very old to kind of start something like that. But it was clear as day, clear as day.
Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Paths, the podcast about people who have lived unusual lives marked by dramatic change or a sense of living different lives simultaneously. You just heard a snippet of today's guest, Enda Gallery. This is a particularly exciting one for me, not only because Enda is a perfect guest for this podcast, having initially set out on a career in accountancy before realizing that he should be a musician, and in recent years achieving growing public acclaim for his music, but also because Enda and I are related, sharing a great-great-grandfather from Ennistymon in County Clare. Before this interview, we had never met or spoken in any way whatsoever. You'll hear more about our gallery connection in the early stages of the interview, and from there we'll hear all about Enda's decision to quit accountancy and study music, his bold move to Berlin, an exciting and artist-friendly city, to give it a go, and much more about his trajectory since then. You can also watch this interview on YouTube. Just type in Pat's Podcast, Enda or Donal Gallery, and it'll pop up right away. I'll include a link in the episode description as well. If you have an unusual life story or know someone who does, please get in touch with me by email at patspodcastpeople@gmail.com. Huge thanks to my aunt Eleanor McGartle and Enda's dad Gerard for putting Enda and I in touch. Thanks also to Dara Hayes for becoming a patron recently. For anyone listening, you can support the podcast on Patreon. It's patreon.com/patspodcast. Alternatively, you could leave a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Any of the above would be greatly appreciated. Okay, over to Enda. Enjoy. All right.
Okay.
Well, how's it going, Enda? It's really nice. It's really nice and like slightly strange in a lovely way to meet you like this over Zoom. I think for anyone listening or watching, they'd probably appreciate a little bit of background here. So, as anyone can see, we have the same surname, but you and I have never met before. Don't know each other from Adam. But the credit for linking us up goes to my aunt Eleanor, who she knew I was doing this podcast. And she got in touch with me one day and said, "I have this idea for a guest. Have you heard about Enda Gallery?" And I should say, like, I'm really out of the loop with the new music, so I hadn't heard about you at that point. And I was like, "No, who's this?" And she goes, "He's like this up and coming musician. He's all over the papers and everything, and he is your distant relation. Maybe you should have him on the podcast." And then Eleanor got in touch with your dad, Gerard. And via that route we were put in touch, and here we are.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
fair play to them.
Yeah, and I gather so the connection, the distant relation, is that we shared a great grandfather.
Yeah, and it's in Clare.
Yeah, and I think where are you now?
I'm in Kilfenora now.
So is that like your family? I think I heard you in an interview saying, are you in your like family farm?
So I'm in the family farm, but on my mother's side. So she's
okay.
So my father, whose gallery is from Ennistymon, and so, I mean, I hang out there quite a lot as well.
Ennistymon's become like kind of a really kind of hip place now all of a sudden, hasn't it?
yeah. It's tons of. I mean, Clare is amazing, and I think Ennistymon is just the easy meeting point for everyone. You know, it's close to Lahinch, but it's also got this kind of cafe scene. You know, and just people can meet there. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's a huge kind of artistic and musical, cultural scene going on in Clare at the minute, I gather. Mixed with a kind of, there's also a kind of hippie scene as well, right? Like that's
Yeah,
slightly distinct.
yeah. So who is there around here? There's like farmers, and then there's tons of creatives. Unbelievable amount of creatives. And then there's hippies, I suppose. And then there's also alternative people who in some ways are different from the hippies. And then there's every type, but like yeah, you do have these distinct groups, and they all mix as well. But yeah, it's a melting pot. I didn't actually know there was a place in Ireland where this many creatives kind of per thousand people were hanging out. And it's pretty amazing. Like when I first left Ireland, I didn't think it existed in Ireland. This many people, like because Dublin is pretty. I mean, they made a real decision with Dublin to make it pretty financially orientated, you know,
Mm.
and it still does have a cool music scene and art scene, but it's tough to exist there, and do those kind of things. Um, and so when I went to Berlin, that was kind of part of the idea. I was like, I need to go somewhere kind of like this that's going to really foster my creative need or creative expressions. But I mean, Claire is pretty stunning for it, you know.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting down there at some point when this is all said and done and we have our freedom back. I'm looking forward to getting down to that part of the country and you know both because it's I always grew up knowing that was kind of the
Mm.
ancestral seat of the gallery family and Ennistymon. But now that it's also like kind of cultural hub, I really have to get down there.
And
Um,
so, where are you based at the moment?
I'm in London.
Yeah,
I've
yeah. Yeah.
I've lived
Whereabouts in London?
in Tottenham. So yeah.
Tottenham. Because my sister lives in London for 20 years now.
Whereabouts is she?
She's in London Bridge. I think she's moving now. She just had a son, maybe a year ago or so, and so they're going to move outside. But I think they're still living in near London Bridge.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Well,
So there you go.
it's
Another gallery to chase down.
well exactly. Well, that's kind of what strikes me about the funny thing about being as distantly related as we are is that we could go through our entire lives never meeting each other and it wouldn't be strange. It would be kind of expected. But equally, we're just about closely related enough that there is a kind of it's nice to meet you. And you've got a bit of a
Yeah.
gallery head on you. I can see it. You look a lot like my brother.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
For anyone who's like tuning in and doesn't know what's going on, just to kind of like locate the story. The other thing about you is not just that we are distantly related; it's that your story perfectly fits the remit of this podcast, which is that you are now a musician and a producer and a musical artist in lots of ways, and you're becoming successful in that. And there's a lot of buzz about your music and a lot of acclaim for it.
Mm.
But earlier in your life, you'd started down a completely different road. You were in a career in accountancy,
Mm.
and then realized pretty quickly that music was actually where you should be going. But that's exactly what this podcast is about. So
Yeah,
it's just a lovely coincidence that there's the added factor of us both being galleries. But
yeah.
I wanna hear all about that story, and I'd say you do a lot of interviews with musical journalists and so on. And I would say, kind of right off the bat, that's not really kind of what I'll be going for here. I'd rather hear about, well, definitely talk about your music a little bit
Mm.
later on, but it's more about your life and the kind of actions and steps you've taken and how you felt about it along the way. And I definitely like to spend a little bit of time talking about the earlier part of your life before we get to the music career. How does that
Cool.
sound?
So, how are you talking? First
Well,
words.
well, what? Well, I'd actually like to hear a little bit about your branch of the gallery family. So maybe tell me a little bit about your folks and like where you grew up.
So my father is Jared Gallery, and he comes from Ennistymon. He had five brothers, and they're all scattered around now. My mother's from Kilfenora, and they both came up to live in Leixlip, with a few little places in between. But they settled in Leixlip and had four children, and I'm the third. And they both teach primary school. They're both retired. I think after 44, 45 years now. They retired last year. Um, they were working mostly in Tala in Kilnamana. Um, so yeah, so that's the kind of lineage anyway. From Glan and Ennistymon is the kind of the gallery side of it anyway.
Yeah. And I gather you've been into music from a really young age. You know, I've done a research on you, and I gather, well, for a start, you were inspired by Oasis as a kid.
Yeah,
That was kind of the first music. Was it Live Forever?
live
Like the
forever.
kind of
Yeah, that was
first.
my first. Yeah, my sister Emer, she's my oldest sister, so she was 7 years older, and she got a hi-fi set one year, which was cool. And it came with. I have two distinct memories of it. One was Flight of the Bumblebee, which came with the hi-fi, as a kind of a piece that could, I suppose, demonstrate the quality of the hi-fi. And then the second thing, which was probably more upper street, was she got the singles box sets of Oasis. And yeah, her playing Live Forever on this hi-fi was my first realization of like, what is this? This is making me, this is changing my emotional state completely. You know,
Mm.
what? This is nuts. What is this? What's going on? And that just made me want to get in there and figure that out and look at it closer, listen closer, find out about it. So yeah, Oasis was that first moment. And there was a ton of moments then since, but yeah, that was the first one.
And you started playing around with music from a really young age, right? Like
Mm.
9, 10 or so, you started like recording with tape recorders and stuff.
So you know, I think my our parents probably had a an idea that it would be great that we had a well-rounded, um, education, and that includes kind of hobbies and exercise and everything. And so, from that point of view, they did a great job just getting each of us into an instrument or two. And so, yeah, when I was a kid, one part of it was, I suppose, that I started piano and started playing recorder, and then recorder kind of turns into flute. So that was the organized part of it. And then the unorganized part of it was, yeah, one Christmas I got a Mickey Mouse tape recorder that had a record function on it, and I really enjoyed playing around with that. My friend Graham just told me because he saw I made a little Instagram post about it because it's about 30 years old, I suppose, 25 years old, and it's still working, going strong. But we used to use it. We used to we used to record people's conversations in the sitting room sometimes as well. It was just like
Not creepy at all.
the cheeky ways. I mean, we're 8 years old or something, but we used to buy my older sister or something, find out what her and her girlfriends are chatting about. And then we go and we'd hear, and it would just usually be very boring. I can't remember anything that was any good. But yeah, so it was a lot of things. It was, yeah, getting into Oasis, being really into music. I had a couple of friends who showed me really cool. I mean, I had one friend in school who was he was one of the kind of tough guys in the class, but kind of in a strange way, he was also really into Queen. Just so two things that don't 100% really fit. But his father got him into
Mm.
Queen, and he got me into Queen. So I had Queen, I had Oasis, and then I got really into hip hop when I was 12, down the Gaeltacht. And someone taught me how to play guitar down there. And then I had my own instrument, like a self-taught instrument.
Yeah, the
Uh,
the Gaeltacht inspired me to learn guitar as well because I saw how many girls crowded around the lads who play guitar.
oh yeah, no doubt. Like I think in my room, in my house, there was maybe 12 guys, and three of them could play guitar. And yeah, it was amazing to watch them play guitar and people play these songs and stuff. And then
Mm.
I was just hooked seeing that. I came home and I learned every song for about 2 or 3 months. It's just baiting into the tabs online.
Mm.
You download the kind of chord tabs.
Well, something that strikes me about you from the little I know of kind of researching you and all that is like you must have a massive work ethic. Like you don't seem like a guy who sits around doing nothing. Like, and I wonder, were you that way inclined as a kid?
No, 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 I actually always had that. Yeah, I always had that. I loved when I was playing Gaelic football. I really loved Gaelic football. I wanted to play for Kildare. Um, when I started watching wrestling, I wanted to be in the WWF, and I'll be throwing my brother around my parents' bedroom, just off the windowsill and doing vertical suplexes onto the bed and whatnot. And and then I got into swimming, and I really wanted to be in the Olympics. Um, so I was just excited about doing big things and going for things, going for exciting things. I'm when things inspire me, they really, really inspire me. Like I'm very kind of tapped into whatever that is. So I'll see something and I'll just be filled with energy, totally filled to the brim, and it'll just get me
And
going
then
for
you
a
can
long time.
focus on it.
And then yeah, and then I just feel nourished, and I have a ton of energy then to give to the pursuit of that.
Mm.
Um, so that's good. I kind of been topping up. It's a winding journey, it's like I probably never had the idea seriously that I was going to do music until I was 21. And then, no,
Yeah,
22 maybe, 21, 21. And that was just a moment traveling. Um, and I was interrailing, and I was doing this master's in accounting, and I absolutely, that was one of the worst years of my life, because I'd tried to set up this business before I started, which was a cloakroom facility for outdoor concerts. So already something was telling me I'd like to be close to music, but also I liked entrepreneurship. I liked setting up something. So I set up this business, and then it was cool. Like it kind of worked out. Like I had like 20 staff for Bon Jovi at Punchestown, and people really, really liked it. But already
yeah.
after doing it once, I was like, this isn't going to make me happy. You know what I mean? So I had
Mm.
actually kind of broke through in a kind of those things are tight circles. It's hard to break in with a new idea, and yeah, I'd kind of gotten in there, and I had done it once, and I just kind of realized like, oh, this isn't going to be enough. And I didn't think I had a verbal agreement with my father that if it worked out, sure, I'd go and do that. And if it didn't work out, I'd go do this master's in accounting, which my mother wanted me to do. And I was like, it's definitely going to work out. So that master's of accounting is never going to happen. But then it didn't really work out. And then I kind of signed the thing, and then I had to go for it. And I had to, at the same time, I'd probably put 7 or 8 thousand into that business, and I had to then find that money. So I had to do this like door to door sales job to get the money back. And so I was doing the masters in accounting from 9 to 5:30, or eight thirty to 5:30, and then I was going out doing this door to door sales job, and I was totally miserable. But it's the time when I started getting into music, then ironically, because I just needed some kind of therapeutic outlet for myself. And then at the end of that year, I went traveling, interrailing, and it was just some moment in the first couple of weeks of Interrail I did on my own. And I think it was the second or third city was Porto in Portugal. And I was just there playing my guitar. And I got a message like from just inside, loud and clear, you're supposed to do music. And I was just about to start a 4-year contract in an accounting company. And it was the middle of the big recession, 2008, 2009. So it was a very inconvenient time to get such a realization, as well as it being very old to kind of start something like that. But it was clear as day, clear as day.
I, I've heard you mention that moment before, and I wanted to hear, even more detail about it. Like, where exactly were you playing the guitar?
I was I was in Porto. There's a river that runs down through the center of it, and I think it was my last day in Porto, and I was there. I brought my guitar. I was playing guitar to myself, totally alone. And I think what I was doing was I was waiting around. I was told one of the things you should do when you're in Porto was go to this port wine tour, right? But they have it just like a couple of times a day, and my train, I think that I could get back to Lisbon was at about 5, and the only port wine tour that was left was at 3:30. It was 3:30 to 4:30, and then I could go to get the train. And it was in French. That was the catch. And I thought, I was really good at French in school, and I thought, sure, I'll be able to manage this in French. And I had forgotten way more French than I expected. So here's me in this French tour. Like it was just before I just remember this French tour. And then people were, of course, speaking French to me on the tour, like the other people. And I also didn't understand them. And they must have just thought, this idiot, like, what is this guy who absolutely can't speak French, doing? I didn't understand anything. like it was so technical, you know. So,
Yeah.
but I enjoyed the port. But anyway, the 2 hours before that, when I was waiting around for that, I was sitting there playing guitar, looking out into the river, and I guess like you know, being alone for a while has a cumulative effect. You start to your own internal messages get a lot louder.
Mm.
So it's a very good, it's a very good thing to do at reasonably regular intervals. But yeah, that was the moment. So I was just looking out there. I had my little guitar that I was bringing over to a friend slowly. You know, I took it on traveling, and I gave it to a friend of mine. Um, and there it was. Yeah,
Were you playing something you'd written yourself?
I think I was, but I can't really remember. I would have probably been playing a couple of my own songs, and a couple of songs that I liked. And I would have just been noodling. I wouldn't have even, probably it wasn't even that audible to anybody else. It would have just been if you were within 10 feet or something, which I probably, some people were just passing. So it wasn't even a public thing, really. I was kind of just feeling free, playing a bit. And it's like, when you just think, I don't know what to compare it to. You know, when someone goes, "You've left the oven on," you know what I mean? And you get that.
Yeah,
You just realize it's like
just hits you.
it's just a clear internal message. And then when it came up, it obviously been under the surface for like a little while, but once it came up, boom, there it was. You know, there'd been
And
obviously
so,
signs before, but that was the clear moment. It was just, I can't even just make it any simpler. It was like I was doing this, like, doodling around, and then the realization came up, like, you're supposed to do music like that.
Mhm. And so then you had another, I guess, couple of weeks or whatever of interrailing, and you're then traveling for the rest of that trip, going, when I get back, I know what I'm doing. I'm changing direction.
Well, no, then it started to be the bit that I didn't know what to do, because I had just done the master's part of this qualification, and they basically pay for about three-quarters of that master's in return for you go work for them for 3 or 4 years. So I had signed myself
Mm.
into a 4-year contract. So I now had a kind of a dilemma, and I was kind of, that's when I started to do the mental gymnastics of like, okay, do I stop already? Do I just pay the money back, and but then I'm 12 grand in debt, and then I'm starting, and it's 2008. I haven't got any money. It's a middle of a recession. 25% of people are unemployed, or at least of young people. I'll be 12 grand in debt, and I don't even know where to start with this. That was one option. Another option, go and do the whole 4 years, save up loads of money, go take trips to build your band and scope it out. Do a lot of practice, start playing around Ireland. This was another idea I had, which I kind of half did. And so those were the two big ones, and it ended up being somewhere in between. I think I knew on the first day going in that I wasn't going to do the 4 years anyway, and then after about 8 months, I did the first set of professional exams, and I knew doing them, I was like, I can't do this to myself ever again. I'm
Right.
This is the last one of these I'm going to do, because if you know you don't want, so they're hard exams, and if you really know you're not in the right place, you know there's really only so much of that kind of stuff you can do to yourself, I think.
Yeah. Um, I'm curious to hear about that period, but before we, because I definitely want to talk to
Yeah,
you all about your time in music and all its different guises.
yeah,
But it's an important part of this podcast to hear a bit of detail about,
yeah.
that kind of previous
Anything you
life.
want. Yeah,
Sorry.
anything you
Um,
want, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Great. Anything. Great.
Yeah,
So that time, like you studied commerce, right? You studied commerce
yeah,
in UCD.
you see. Yeah.
Um, and then you go in, you get a master's in accountancy, and you go into that career. So was that kind of striking you the whole, like when you were doing all those kind of subjects in university and everything? Was it kind of hitting you through that time? You're like, what am I doing here? Or were you just going with the flow at that point?
See, the thing is that I already wanted to do different things along the way. So actually, when I left school, I didn't want to do music. That's not what I was thinking. When I was I finished school at 17. I wanted to be a pro triathlete, and I wanted to buy and sell shares, because I'd been buying and selling shares since I was 12 on my dad's
Right.
on my dad's account, my dad's broker account. So I would call up the broker, Bob. I would say, Bob, um, I had €1,000 savings or something, and I built it up to 4,000 by the time I was 17. And I was really into it. I had a couple of mentors who would give me books on that kind of stuff, and I was really good at it. Like, started to get really good at it. Just starting to understand the mechanics of like how a company works and what makes and the psychology of it too. Like, things get extremely overpriced and things get extremely underpriced, and no company pretty much is valued what it actually is worth. And that's the whole thing, that's the lens of that. And so I was really into that, and I was doing well, and I was good at it, and I enjoyed it. And I was still 17, so I actually still couldn't legally do it, but I was convinced I was going to do that. I could do that as a full-time job, and I had gotten really serious about triathlon, so I wanted to train full-time. But I got the reality check, which was that if I want to do that, you can move out of home, and you can't afford to be living in Dublin doing that kind of crack. I don't think at 17. So I was encouraged to pick a course that was fitting off stuff that I was good at in school, and um, commerce. Was 17 hours a week or something like that. So my mother kind of convinced me that it was a good idea, and it probably was. Um, so then I had time to do triathlon training. I was doing like 24 hours a week triathlon training at that time.
Jesus.
And
So that was a realistic option, like to go
yeah,
professional in that possibly.
it possibly, yeah. I mean, like, I got a sports scholarship to UCD, and I won European, or I won Irish junior championships, and I went to
Well,
European junior championships, and I got my ass kicked at Europeans. Absolutely ass kicked. I mean, but it's a different league. Europe is a different league when it comes to sports. Like, we showed up in our rental Renault Megane, and
yeah.
the team Belgium bus rolls by, and there's
It's like
people with.
Cool Runnings.
Oh, it's exactly. It maybe even was more extreme. I had bought this bike with like my spare money from when I was 15. I got a job in Spar, my first job, and I saved up all that money, and I got a bike that was €300, and it was originally probably €1,500 back in the 90s, you know. But these guys were going around with wheels that were 2 or 3 grand, and they were spare wheels. So if they got a puncture, they just put on a spare wheel. And it's like, if I got a puncture, I'm going home, like, that's it. So no, it was a different level altogether. So you can imagine that's just the gear, but then the training and everything. And so yeah,
Yeah.
went there. Um, but yeah, that was wild. So at the time, I kind of was like gearing up for that, but I was training so much my own that I kind of just lost interest a bit in that. Like, it's a very lonely sport if you're training a lot on your own. And I had a coach who was giving me very long sessions, and they slowly wear you out. I was in college. Everybody around me was having a lot of fun, and I was kind of going out on these 2 hour runs and 5 hour cycles and all this kind of stuff. And then I went to Europeans, and then this, I didn't really, I kind of could see the level. And then then there was this crazy thing that happened, which is that both of the people I went to Europeans with have since died in car accidents. One of them died like
Shit.
2 or 3 weeks later. She was, I think she'd qualified for the Olympics and everything, or at least she was really trying. Caroline Carney, and she was a lovely, lovely person. So we went to that Europeans in France, and then the other guy who was another junior, he died I think 3 or 4 years later in really similar circumstances. So I was like getting freaked out. Um, so I just kind of lost interest, and then ironically, then I got offered a sports scholarship, and I really wanted that, and I would have probably quit, but I was like, sure, let's try this out. But then I kind of lost the heart to do it. I didn't really wasn't enjoying it that much. And then you're just in a commerce course. You're just cruising through. You're making the best of things. I was still like 19, so it wasn't the end of the world. I kind of could get inspired by what was going on, like maybe to set up my own business as a way of getting kind of freedom. But I never liked the real, the real like officey typical thing. Definitely always knew I didn't want to do that kind of stuff. I wanted to do something real fun and with a lot of creativity and yeah, just a different path, just go on my own adventure.
Can you picture yourself when you were in that office? You were obviously there for like about a year or so.
Yeah, I was there for
Um,
11 months, yeah. And they were really nice, they're really lovely people. And then there was a few funny sort of coincidences as the universe up to our old tricks always does. One of them was that our clients included Bono on the Edge,
right.
and the partner of the division had written a song to try and be Ireland's entry for the Eurovision and came third or something like that. And he was a musical dude, he played the piano very well, and so there was a few funny things like that. But the work when you're starting off is like really, really basic, like, I had been like an academic scholar and a sports scholar and really tried to do things different. And I just set up my own business and before I did the masters. And then you go in there and you're putting stuff in alphabetical order, and you're doing other stuff
Yeah.
later, of course. But like, I remember just being like, wow, I used to a real
If it,
struggle to get the train in the morning and stuff. Like I'd wake up at the last possible minute and then I'd have to run for the train, you know.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
really didn't enjoy that at all.
You're making me think. I remember David Mamet, the playwright, writes books kind of about the
Mm.
philosophy of drama, and he said in one of his books that consultancy is a bribe for young people not to be creative. And
Wow.
maybe there's consultants out there who would that would raise their hackles, but that's what you're making me
Mm.
think of when you say that.
Yeah, tax in particular, I just thought like I thought it was meaningless. Like as in from a media point of view, it's not necessarily meaningless. But if you think about what it is if you zoom out, like all these smart people who are 18, 19, 20, 21, and so on, like some of the smartest people in the country are taken after they've been educated by the state, and a few thousand of them go to work for companies and a few thousand of them go work for the government, and they essentially play this game which starts off as someone makes a really simple rule about the taxation, and these people are supposed to pay it, but they don't want to pay 100% of that. They want to get away with some other bits, so they hire one smart person to figure out a few loopholes, how they can minimize it, and only like the wealthiest can do that. And then eventually it gets
Mm.
back to the government, and they need to hire two smart people to get rid of these loopholes. And then the company is like, let's hire a couple of more smart people, get around these new rules. And slowly you have these books, which are 1,000 pages each per type of taxation to close every
Mm.
possible detail. It's not just about the spirit of the law or the spirit of contributing to a whole. It's about how little can you contribute, and I just felt like all of this is meaningless. Like if people kind of could go in on the spirit of contributing to the whole, then thousands of people wouldn't need to do this kind of meaningless middle job, of
Mm.
calculating this exact number or chasing up someone who's done the calculation wrong. And I was really aware of that. I just thought at the time, imagine all these people were working on some important disease. Like collectively, if that energy was
Yeah,
going into researching cancer rather than this, because this doesn't create anything in the end. Like, um,
yeah,
and no disrespect to anybody who's doing that, because it is actually part of our society already and it needs to now happen. But I remember just being like, even if you learn things in that and you learn a lot of that isn't actually wisdom, because the rules can be changed 10 years later. And then what do you know now? You know what I mean? Um, and so
yeah.
I kind of just started to determine that there's some differences between knowledge and wisdom, and I was much more attracted to wisdom than knowledge.
That's very eloquently put. And yeah, really a really nice description of kind of what brought you to that moment, or what part of what brought you to that moment in Porto. So yeah, let's hear now about the transition into music. So you leave. How exactly do you leave? You go and do is it a music technology masters in University of Limerick,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you say goodbye to the job. How do they react?
Um, I mean, again, I can't stress this enough. They're really nice people. So, So it happened in kind of a funny way. Like I had just done these professional exams, and I remember thinking during the professional exams, like if I fail these, they'll actually fire me. You know what I mean? You have to pass. But I was like, ah, it's not really honest. It's not really this. Not that's not the way to do it either. So I passed them. But I remember just in that time after, I met a friend of mine who'd actually, funny enough, he'd also done commerce, and he'd actually also gone and done music technology in UL. And he was one of my closest friends. So it's very funny. He'd kind of done it, but 1 year ahead of me. And I met him and then he'd since gone up to Trinity, I think, to kind of work further on kind of music technology kind of stuff. And I met him for a pint, and I was just like, man, I'm really stuck, and I want to now get out. I need to make the move. I can't do it anymore. It was so clear. And he said, I kind of was looking at a few courses, and he talked about the one in UL, and I looked at a few in the UK and stuff like that, but the one in UL looked like really, really cool. So I just kind of made a resolution to myself, like I'm doing it. And then I went back. I can't remember I think I might even have gone back to the office that evening, and I called up, um, and I'd actually missed the deadline by 2 weeks. And I remember having a conversation with her, going like, oh, I'd like to apply for that master's. I can't get into the application process on your website. And she said, oh, that's because it actually closed 10 days ago. And I just said, is there any chance I can still apply? And she said something like, I'll say you had a death in the family, but you have to do it tonight because there's starting interviews tomorrow. And then I was like, yeah, I'll do it tonight. So I stayed up. I got some kind of inside track information from my friend who'd gotten into this course, just about stuff that was going to be on the course. So at least I could kind of learn a bit about it. Was very sudden, but I felt like this is what I need to do. Absolutely, this is the right thing. So I stayed up and I did this application. And then I remember, I don't know if it was just one day later, they were like, can you come down to Limerick? And I was like, I actually can't because, I haven't told anybody that I'm taking off work or anything. So I'll just have to do it on Skype. So I took the morning off work and I did this Skype interview. And I remember my little brother was in the other room. And he's kind of like, what are you up to? And I kind of had to be kind of secretive about it, a little bit. And then I was doing this interview on Skype to get into this master's. And an interview went really well. And about 2 weeks later, I found out I got in. And then I was like, oh, now I got to break the news to the guys at work and also to my parents and whatnot. So yeah, I was like, oh, uh, that was a difficult news to break in a way. So the people at work, they were actually super nice. I mean, one of them, they were worried about me a little bit. You know what I mean? Because I mean,
Mm.
they had actually started paying people €5,000 to take a year off because they'd hired way too many people. Then there was the big recession. Nobody really saw that coming. They'd hired too many people. People were sitting around. There was no work for them, and so they were actually like they were delighted to have less staff. Put it that way. So
Mm.
when I kind of came in and said, I want to leave, I want to do this, the HR person, super lovely woman, was like, are you sure? Would you not finish the professional qualification and then you can do it and you'll always have that to fall back on? And I remember people asking me a lot about this thing to fall back on. And I've always had a resistance to that idea. I don't like that idea of having something to fall back on and preparing your fallback more and more and more about the fallback. I think there is a real thing of like you gotta go for it. You can't make your fallback too cushy or you know, it's hard to really go for it. And I remember being like, nah, I have to really go for it. And then even the partner was like, it's really difficult to make money. It's really, really difficult. Like, are you sure? You know, and I was like, yeah. And then there was another kind of director who was like, I think you're doing the right thing. Like, fair play to you.
Nice.
Go for it. And and so there was all, but everybody was kind. Like they were all really lovely people. I just think I wasn't in the right place, and I probably
Yeah.
wasn't even that great of a worker in that job because it didn't mean anything to me, and it's
Yeah.
hard to do a job well when you don't care. you know. But like you can't force yourself too much to care. You do your best. Like I did my best to care as much as possible.
I very
You know.
much know the feeling. I mean, I'm an actor, and I've spent, like a lot of actors, I've spent a load of time out of work doing other types of work, and I absolutely know how hard it is to motivate yourself when you don't care about something. It's a
Yeah,
strange headspace to be in.
yeah.
I should say, a full disclosure, that the actual second last episode we had was a guy who's an actor and a doctor, and he and I actually had, it's like
Wow,
simultaneously, Shaladi,
amazing.
and we actually had a conversation about the whole having a fallback. And in that conversation, I was saying that I think it can work. I think the difference with him is that he actually enjoys the other career.
That's the
You know,
difference. Then it's not a fallback. It's just another thing that
yeah,
you
as he
enjoy
as
in your
he said, it's two plan A's. You can have more. It's not a
yeah.
plan A, plan
Plan A.
B. It's
There
more
you
than
go.
one plan A.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
that's what I do when I'm a producer and I'm an artist, and I run a record label or like I manage other people. These are all plan A's that I enjoy, and that um, it's just diversity in like it's a very sort of industrial revolution kind of idea that we should all be so specialized. I
hmm.
actually like this idea of like you can be a doctor and a great musician. I love that. Why not?
Completely agree. Absolutely. And as Ish said, we have the time. I mean, you certainly have the time to devote yourself to two things you love. Maybe if you
Mm,
multiply that to 10, 20, it starts to break down. But I'd say
yeah.
anyone could carve out time for two things.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I mean, look at
and as you
look
said,
at some people like who are even actors. Within that, they're actors who can sing, or who can also dance, or who can, even just the different types of activities within one activity. You know what I mean? You got to be able to learn off scripts. You got to be able to speak well. You essentially have to
mm,
be a good public speaker. This could be called acting, but in it, you might have to be a good speaker. You might have to have a great memory or ability to learn off scripts. You might have to be a great communicator. You might have to be a great singer. You might have to, just be great at body language. So within even acting, you're becoming very good at six or seven different things. And so it's
you're
kind of good if you've got some crossover between you know, your exploits.
you're summarizing some of the themes of this podcast that have been explored
Mm.
in recent times. But yeah, I want to hear, and I'm sure the listener wants to hear more about your journey. Then, so you do this course um,
Yeah,
in music technology, and
yeah.
and I should say, I haven't said this yet. Like, in getting to know you since that call with my aunt, I've been listening to your music, and like I said at the outset, I'm not massively in the loop with new music, but it's been a genuine pleasure discovering your music. Like, I honestly really like it, and it's has such variety. Uh,
Mm.
and there's lots of different genres being explored, but also there's something that feels very fresh about it. And I think you've talked publicly about kind of mixing in Irish traditional kind of sounds with things like hip hop and more modern stuff and everything like that. So really enjoy that. Um,
Cool.
I'm curious about. I had another guest on the podcast who's a musician, and we were talking. I don't know if you've ever come across a guy called Rick Beato. Have you come across this guy? He's
No.
a, he's a YouTuber who's like a music producer, and part of his
Oh,
channel
cool.
is that he deconstructs like great songs. He's mad into like kind of stuff like Guns N' Roses and kind of like
Nice.
guitar music from the 70s, amongst other stuff. But
Cool.
in his
Yeah.
deconstruction of songs, where he like does the different individual tracks and everything, I was like, when I was in a band as a teenager, I was in so far over my head in thinking that I could
Uh,
do what these people were doing. And I'm curious, do you in your music making, how much do you use kind of musical theory and knowledge of how musical keys work and that kind of classical idea of harmonies and stuff like that, or are you more intuitive?
um, I use everything I can use. So that's an aspect of it, and I know that to a certain level, and there's people who know a lot more. But I have a intuitive. intuitively good understanding of it. Again, there's like you've got one life, you've got a certain amount of time, so you can choose to really go down everything to the infinite depths. You know what I mean? So I know a certain amount about harmony, and I know a certain amount about theory, and I know, you know, I really trust my intuition, and I also really learn about how to craft a production in terms of sounds, in terms of use of contrast or development, or how memory works. The psychology of changing something, or creating expectations, or breaking expectations, or playing with expectations. So everything, yeah. I kind of like I kind of use and go into what I feel I need to. And then once I feel like I'm starting to get less and less returns, or it's becoming just too technical, then I'm usually go explore another area, you know, um, or try and really absorb that into how I do things. Because otherwise, I find like I'm just studying, I find that like
Mm.
you got to be able to apply stuff pretty soon, even if it's just starts off kind of basic, but I think what you apply, what you actually start using, um, you kind of master, and then you kind of need to master or be able to give stuff a good go to get some benefit out of it. So
Mm.
um, I also just believe in that you learn so much from actually making it, or like your friend, like he's deconstructing stuff, and you can deconstruct stuff from so many angles. You can do it from a music theory way, or you can just do it from like what's happening kind of way. There could be no theory involved in it. You could just break down what exactly is happening. So it starts off with just this, and then this comes in, and how does that feel, and then
Mm.
everything comes out, and why would they do that, and how does it make me feel, and then when everything comes back in, or it comes back in but it's in this new way, how does that make me feel? And so you can do the same thing without any theory, but theory does, like, theory is one angle on it, and it's a helpful angle, and it makes sense of a lot of stuff, especially to do with chords and tension and release. Yeah, it's very useful, but yeah, I don't know if that answered the question exactly, but there's
No,
so many
absolutely.
angles. There's so many angles, and they're all helpful. You know what I mean? Like, some people are just sound freaks, freaks of sound. You know what I mean? And some people have never explored music theory, but they've just played 100 or 1,000 songs that they love in a particular genre, and that just becomes totally intuitive knowledge about what works in a particular genre. And there's other people
Mhm.
who could write something in their head using music theory and counterpoint and all this kind of stuff. And so people got all sorts of angles. I have a mixed set, and I have a highly highly intuitive approach.
Did you pick that up mostly yourself, or was that course, the Masters in UL, was that very instrumental in your kind of abilities and what you do as a musician?
Um, it was. I mean, it's funny because it's a master's course, but it takes years to actually become good at it still. Like years of actually doing it. So we would have done like a couple of modules in engineering, and a couple of modules in composition, and a couple of modules in sort of the history of music technology, and we would have done programming, and we would have done sound design, and you know lots of stuff. Um, and then we would have done our thesis and stuff like that. But I mean, you really only learn by doing it, I think. So I was going out there, and I was like playing my songs, and that was me learning that. And I was combining it with, like, I did a really cool thesis where I had these dancers, and when they moved, it changed the sound, and that's a totally different abstract way of
Hmm.
composing. And so all these different strands start to add together to something. Like, I could play the flute, that felt like really far away point, and I was playing guitar songs, and then I was making this music, interpretive dance music for dancers, and they all felt really far away from each other. And then when I decided to leave, I kind of like felt like not right about going back to Dublin. Limerick felt very small, even though it was cool. And I had been, yeah. So my plan I kind of did it. This plan I told you when I was doing the interrail, and I thought maybe I could just, set up my band over that 3 or 4 years. I could visit different cities, like Manchester, where Oasis from, or Liverpool, where all these, the Beatles and whatnot are from, and London, and maybe I can find my bandmates. I'll have like some years to find the best bandmates. But what ended up happening was I just used to take Fridays off, and I used to get they had these €6 Ryanair flights back in the day. They were like 6 a.m. So I'd go there Thursday night and get the 6 a.m. to Liverpool. And I think I went to London once because my sister was there, but I was kind of like, I don't know how people afford to live here. It's insane. And
Mm.
I just didn't have an angle into the city from a creative point of view. And I went to Liverpool, and then Liverpool was supposed to be, I suppose, the second place in about 10 that I was going to explore. But then I just fell in love with Liverpool. I met a lot of friends there, including some buskers and stuff. And I just made a lot of friends. And then I just kind of was like visiting Liverpool quite a lot. But still, nowhere felt like the place that I should go. And then I had a couple of friends who were doing music full time in Berlin. And I kind of said, okay, I'll come check it out. And I went there, I think, to February after the masters finished. It finished, I suppose, in September. And I went there, and it was minus 12 degrees, and it was full of snow. And I went to an open mic, and I played there, and someone was like, "That was amazing! Like, can you come play this other thing?" And that was like my first gig with a bit of cash, and I was like, "Man, the city's amazing!" Like, because it's just overall an amazing city. And then I came back 2 or 3 times, and I think also it just was great to see that this friend of mine was able to live from music. So I was like, that's amazing. And it
From
wasn't
bus
like
bit
they
of
were
busking and gigs.
from busking and gigs, yeah. And it wasn't like these people were great musicians. They had like a style, and they worked hard, but like that was just fascinating to me. Like, I had very few examples in Ireland of people who were actually living from music. Very few. Actually, I had none.
Mm.
I did not have.
Right.
Didn't have one in my
Y-
circle.
You make me think of the comparison that's made with acting, because everything I ever hear about Germany is that it's a much more livable place for actors as well. Like they've got a lot more public funding, and like, I'm not sure the exact details, but that theater companies will kind of keep people in employment kind of in perpetuity. So you've got stable income, and theater tickets are much cheaper. So the whole kind of ecosystem seems a lot healthier. Is that is that part of what's going on with music in Germany, or is it something else?
Well, first of all, Berlin is just a much more affordable place to live.
Mm.
So I could go over there and live. I was living on €800 a month in the first year. So I could earn easy €100 on a Sunday, because there was this big park day where everybody went to this particular park called Mao Park, and and every day or every Sunday would get at least €100. And I usually used to bring a musician or two, and we'd make like €300 or €400 and then split it, and that'd be my rent covered. And so then I would just do bits
Mm.
and pieces of gigs to pick up the rest. And can you imagine doing that in Dublin? It'd be impossible. You know what I mean? You're trying to get together this 2 grand for your apartment, or however much.
For
But
your closet.
just the fact that I could, survive. I was very stubborn when I started. I was like, I'm not gonna get another job. Now I changed my mind on
Mm.
that actually later, where I was at, I was just like, I'm so far behind in terms of someone who's starting off. I'm 20. I guess I was 23, playing my first show. It's not like you're 14 or something.
Mm.
I just thought like I want to catch up. I want to dive in, and so yeah, you kind of just got up the courage to go busking. It took me about 3 or 4 days. I was kind of petrified about it. It took me maybe I think 4 or 5 days of egging myself on to get out there first, and then it kind of became second nature. You know how it is. Like, you play and it's not so bad. Got 150 the first time, like a €1.50, and
The
then
first song or the first session?
the first session I went into a U band
Oh
station.
shit.
Ah, yeah, but like, you're just, yeah,
Yeah,
150, but
you're raw.
150 is 150 still.
Yeah.
150 that I didn't have before. So, and then you figure it out. You start to figure it out. You go there and you learn and you try and you fail and you know you do really badly. You see some other people doing amazing. You start to figure out why is that working? What are they doing? And some stuff you can't bridge. You know, some people are just born to be buskers, and I'm not born to be a busker. But but you can get decent at it. You can get good enough to survive it. Ultimately, I actually didn't really enjoy busking, to be honest. I don't like the grabby attention kind of
Mm,
nature of it. It didn't suit the type of music that I was making. I really discovered that I way prefer intimacy, or when the intimacy is granted, and then people give you their attention, and then they trust you to do something good with it. That's just way more attractive for me. But
mm.
yeah, that's how I survived my first year in Berlin. So yeah, playing on the streets, playing every little gig that got offered to me. I think I played 50 gigs, including busking days, which were like
Mm.
you'd play 5 or 6 sets in a day. So I went
It's
hard at it.
really, yeah, man. It's really impressive. I mean, it just seems you had the courage and you backed it up with the work, you know. And I think anyone listening would go, because I imagine there's so many people who work in corporate environments or just work in any kind of job that they'd much rather do something creative, and they just kind of can't fathom taking the action that you did, you know. So
Mm.
kudos to you. And how many years did it take until you felt kind of more solidly secure in it, that you know that well, yeah, did there come a point where you're like, oh no, this I feel pretty solid now?
I
How long
think
did that take?
honestly that's only come this year.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah.
9 years later.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I had moments of
And
being slightly solid. Like, so I'll give you an example. So at the end of that first year, I was actually totally burnt out. Like, I was, you know, you get used to living broke, so that's not really a problem. But I was broke. I was playing all the time, and I was super exhausted, you know, and so I was actually feeling kind of depressed, and I was like, this is supposed to be my dream. Like, what's going on if I'm not happy now? And then a friend of mine had been hosting somebody, and she was going to India to this ashram, and she was telling me about this ashram, and I was like, man, I need to go to this ashram. And so I just booked tickets to go to this ashram in India with this person, and it was like a month long kind of meditation, yoga, uh, yeah, basically you study kind of yoga teaching actually, and but it's a super intense schedule. And I was in a room with this Italian guy who trained with all these masters from Sri Lanka and Thailand and everything, like out of this world guy. I could feel him straight away. And this was amazing because I just started to understand the nature of my mind for the first time. And I realized that I suppose at 23 or 24, I had never been conscious. You know, I had been clever and everything, but I'd never been like aware, you know? Like, I mean, not aware of what's going on outside me. I mean, like, aware of like what's really happening, as in living in my own awareness, even seeing what's in my own mind, from being aware of what's in my own mind, not just my mind being aware of what's outside, if that makes sense.
mm, I think it does. You know, I wanted to ask you about this because I've heard you talk in other interviews about that kind of transformative process and the effect that meditation and that experience in the ashram and everything had on you. It feels to listen to you speak, you know, you have a kind of a real conviction, or you seem there's a lot of kind of clarity about the way you speak, and I imagine that that may have come from these experiences, or maybe you were always that way.
The way, I mean, it's a real fascinating process. I mean, like it's hard for me. This is my personal experience, but it's hard for me to even remember what I was like, because I would just have these kind of fleeting moments of being aware. But like when you go to a place like that and you're really training, you're kind of aware almost all the time, and your life changes radically. And you kind of if you know, by 2 weeks into it, then I was starting to get it, and by the end of it, then it was like unbelievably sharp. Like every in breath, every out breath, you're aware. You know, the daydreaming has almost disappeared, and so you're aware of every thought
Right.
as it arises, as it goes. You know, rather than being absorbed
Mm.
in the ego, which means that you forgot yourself in favor of a kind of a subset of yourself, which is like a bundle of thoughts and sort of body language. So I did this one exercise that this Italian guy, Samuele, taught me, which is that you can only really do it when when your awareness is quite high, but you remain aware, and then you'll notice that once you enter a certain situation, a certain set of thoughts start to emerge, a certain kind of body language, and you'll start to do also different things. So, and I'll give you an example. Like, so when you're going, just say you're in an audition and you're put in a room with three other dudes who you're competing against, right, for this part, you'll start to be a certain person, but
Mm.
but put you in a room with someone who you find really attractive, you'll be a totally different person. You know, you'll have different thoughts totally. You'll have a different body language. You'll do say and do different things, and they can kind of be bundled up into these like kind of sub personalities. And so the reason it's such a powerful exercise is because you start to realize like, oh, in this type of situation, I'm this. You know, this personality arises. In this personality or in this situation, this personality arises, and so on. And I think I had 12 by the end of the course, but then I kept on doing it for a while. I had like 50. And then but then you realize who is the one who sees all the different personalities. And then this to me was discovering my actual nature
Mm.
rather than these learned behaviors to survive certain situations. And living in
S-
that viewpoint, it's a whole different life, you know.
So do you feel that now that you're consistently that person as opposed to those sub personalities that you talk about?
So when you come out of of one of those kind of experiences like India, you have it super high, like your awareness is unbelievably high for a while, you know, when you've been really training it, and it slowly goes back down. You don't lose all of it, like you keep certain amount, crystallize it, but after a few months, it starts to fade. You know, you forget more and more. So, and then it takes over. But I had a series of just, you know, I had a few months of like just really, you know, being super aware all the time, and crazy stuff would happen. You know, like I had been like hustling super hard for you know 2012, just playing every little opportunity, being exhausted. You know, and then in 2013, I would just have experiences like my friend would call me up and say, "Hey, my girlfriend just broke up with me. I'm really upset. Can you come over?" You know, and I'd be like, "Yep, you know, this feels like the right thing to do. Let's go over there." And then it would just feel like, "Hey, should we make a bit of music? You know, take your mind off it." And I'm like, "Let's do it." And then another friend of mine in Berlin said to me, "Will you help me produce this or present this radio show? I just got a gig on community radio in Berlin." I'm like, "Yeah, this feels right. I'll help you with that." And then I play one of the demos that I made with my friend over here on this radio show that I think nobody listens to. And the head of Universal Germany calls us and wants to sign us.
Mm.
And that was
S-
just like showed me, man, you know, you can really hustle against the universe, or if you get into that flow, it's actually it's not that effortful, you know.
Mm.
And it's just on things can be on a totally different scale. Now that part ultimately didn't work out in that exact way, but then after that, people started asking me to produce their stuff, and then that was the start of me getting paid to produce other people's stuff, which is a much more stable way. Now I still only earning about 1,000 a month for 2013, 2014, 2015, but that was enough for me. You know what I mean? To live, and it was kind of more regular, and so that felt good. That felt like probably that felt getting settled. I think when I got my first album production job, it was like 1,000 a month, and then I was like, okay, cool. This feels solid. I'm super settled now in Berlin. I'd been super shaky, just living month to month. You know what I mean? It's hard to keep it going. But when I got that, then I was like, okay, I think I'm kind of set. I think I can settle here. You know?
Mm. You made me think. That's already interesting. When you're talking about the kind of effect of the meditation, yoga, and so on. I heard you refer to a shroom trip in one of your interviews, and what you were saying reminded me of I had a few experiences of doing shrooms when I was around 21 or so.
Mm.
And in one of those experiences, there was one kind of like peak one, um, and I think I experienced what people talk about refer to as ego death, but it was like
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about, where it's like you suddenly feel like you're seeing the construction of your own personality. And it
Mm.
is a very I don't know, it's a very kind of liberating feeling. Kind of, I remember I was laughing loads, and I went home and I was just pissing myself laughing because it all seemed so funny. And then the next day, my sister said to me, she was like, "Who did you bring home last night? What are you talking about? Who was laughing?" Um, but
Oh, that's so funny, man.
yes, but I really like that idea. It sounds like that had a great effect on you. And then, yeah, as you say, well, I'm curious to ask you about that as well, because what you're talking about there in terms of kind of going, not pushing against things and it not being effortful, and the thing with the universal guy and everything. I heard you refer to God in one of the interviews you did as well. And I wonder, are you like religious in a kind of traditional way, or do you believe in God, or is it more kind of spirituality and believing in a certain degree of fate? How would you describe it yourself?
Um, I'm not. I'm not religious. But I do think that actually all of the religious um faiths are essentially grounded on exactly the same thing. And I don't really experience them as like different beliefs. Like so. I think Jesus Christ was totally on to what is really happening. The reality of things, and that um in the same way as Buddha, and they just had different angles, and based on who they are in this life. Um, but yeah, I'd say it's probably more conventionally known as a spiritual approach. But yeah, I mean, like all of them have something to offer on the angle of it, like the Sufis, or the Christians, or the Buddhists. It's just like different angles of understanding on essentially the same thing. To me, there's basically no contradictions. You know, the contradictions, in my opinion, come from human error. Human interpretations being added. But I can benefit a lot from a lot of them. But I don't follow any of them strictly. Maybe the closest one that I follow strictly is like the Buddhists or the Sufis. But I find like they offer without needing you to be strict, in any way. So I don't call myself anything, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, absolutely makes sense. And what about the more recent times? How is the experience? Because now you're I gather starting to become quite well known and quite acclaimed. Like you're very regularly in the papers in Ireland, and I know there's kind of networks you're working with, lots of brilliant people and so on. How has that felt, that kind of transition from where you were before to the kind of you feeling like you're starting to get settled to now?
Um, so starting to get settled, that would have been 2014, but then even in 2016, 2017, when I wanted to kind of, write more and work on my own projects, that was the point where I decided I'm going to have to get a job. You know, I got a job in a startup uh,
Right.
for 15 months, working 20 hours a week, because I had a certain experience with some band where it was kind of a negative experience with just how they treated people, and I just kind of decided to set for myself that everybody I worked with, I was going to pay them, properly. And in order to do that for my own music, I need to get a job. I can't do it any other way. And so I got a job. I was the head of marketing at a artificial intelligence startup.
I love this, just ace in the hole. I had no idea about this.
Oh man, very funny, very funny. I like one thing I think that is a particular strength of mine is I'm a savage learner. Like I'm a savage learner. So
Right.
I had a friend who's in approximately this area, and I could just glean enough from him in a few hours to be pretty good at that. You know, just
Yeah.
walk in and be pretty good and learn quick. Like so, I did a good job, really good job at it. And then after 15 months, um I got another opportunity to then do music really full time, but also to build a label and stuff. And that actually is the thing that came out of the mushroom strip, which is like I had a is my one and only, but it was very profound and in a beautiful circle. And afterwards, I kind of realized this is my purpose. Let's say in this life is to create beautiful things, and that includes facilitating other people to create beautiful things. And then my friend whose birthday it was, who's the reason of the ceremony, I could just see his form is he's an absolute facilitator of people, and I didn't know what he did for work or anything like that, but we kind of had the vision like we need to work together, and we then met the next week, and we were like, you can try to change the world with money, but in a way you need trillions if you want to go down that route. You can change the world with politics, but it takes hundreds of years. Also takes a lot of money. There's a lot of risks of falling into traps. But in a way, you can change the world um, immediately by making art, because art affects culture. And then he was actually a coach, like a coach of kind of executives and whatnot. And his company was doing really well, and he was excited by this idea. And he said, "Listen, if I can set up, like, get the investment basically for this, do you want to? You're gonna have to build it basically, um, and run it." And he's like, "Would you want to do that?" And I said, "Man, that'd be a dream." And so, 1 week went by and I didn't hear anything else. He said, I got to check with the guys, all the partners in this company. And 1 week went by and kind of nothing happened, and two went by and three went by. And I was kind of like, okay, it's another music industry type of thing. Like, people in music will know there's a lot of things that are promised that don't occur. So 4 weeks goes by, nothing, kind of starting to put it down now. And then 5 weeks come by, and then he calls me and he's like, yeah, everybody approved it. So let's
Nice.
so we can start tomorrow. And so I got to do that. So again, I just got enough to live on, and then some resources to build a label. And I already had some artists that I wanted to facilitate, like just beautiful artists. And so I set up a distribution arm, and I eventually found and trained a manager, to work to help the artists and to do the day to day and slowly run the label. So I could more focus on the creative stuff and production and more like creative development. And yeah, so it's been a lot of twists and turns, but it's still going to this day. And it's doing really well. Yeah, so that's the circle maybe you mentioned of like everybody's starting to do really well. Um, yeah, in that.
That's Welcome to the New World. Is that the name of the label?
That's welcome to the new world. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have
Uh,
six artists now, more or less. Four that we also manage, including me, and two others that we just signed to make some music.
yeah, I listened to your collaborations with Strange Boy.
Mm.
Um, like, and again, I'm glad to have been, you know, exposed to his music and your music together
Mm.
through this experience. Because again, I didn't see that coming, you know, but he's brilliant. Um, and
World class, amazing, amazing.
yeah, and I love the song "The Pope" is great, but then I also love the is it "Waiting" is a much more
Yeah,
relaxed one, so there's a real range going on there as well.
yeah. He's got an album out
And
next month. We've made an album, and the first track has Moya Brennan from Clannad on it. Um,
nice.
it's gorgeous, and his brother also features on it, and another Limerick rapper called Hazy. But it's amazing. It's going to be the first that I know of like hip hop album that's like trad and hip hop in something new, but done really well. You know,
Mm.
and yeah, so it's got banjo and harp and voice and bodhrán and a little guitar, some fiddle, some flute, and yeah, it's mostly made here in Kilfenora in this house.
It's amazing. And no better place for it. Claire
Actually,
has
no,
such a
actually, no
tradition of.
better place for it. It feels totally right to make that kind of music here. Totally right.
Mm. And I think you made the point, you know, that hip hop has obviously come out of America and it tends to be very influenced by the American practitioners of it and more recently British. But there's no reason why Irish people shouldn't be doing it in their own voice because Ireland, you know, more possibly than any English speaking country has such a tradition of poetry and, you know, linguistic dexterity. So
Yeah, exactly.
um
I think it's like one of those things where where there's like dots of things and they seem like they're not related, but if you put them in a certain constellation, they become completely related. And it's like hip hop seems very far from Ireland until you consider that we've got some of the best poets of all time, and we've got a lot of them, you know,
yeah.
and and rap in a way is just another type of poetry, but it's just more the spirit. I think that is it's what makes it hip hop, and I really believe in using your own materials, your own voice and your own source materials, and definitely take inspiration. But the spirit of hip hop is, I think, is that one of resilience, and it's that one. It's like of retaining your power in the face of oppression, and there's many people in this country who can benefit from that energy, but they can make it their own by using the materials that they have to hand, that are really their own. But that spirit
Mm.
exists all over the world. It just became hip hop music in the States.
Have you seen that interview with Tupac where he talks about the genesis of rap and he paints this image of it's like people in the hallway of a hotel when there's this like big party, big feast with loads of food and stuff going on in a room, and it begins with kind of knocking on the door and singing sweet songs, and then it kind of slowly gets more and more energetic, you know, and maybe a bit more kind of aggressive, and then by the end of it you're like, you know, we're coming through blasting kind of thing. And
Mhm.
um yeah, I
That's
feel
interesting.
that, like you say, that's fitting for Irish history and for Irish culture as well.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of people in Ireland who are also in that situation, for various reasons, that like, that they can really use and benefit from that resilient energy, that in a way, that rebellious energy, that it's a powerful energy of, I am going to prevail, you know, and I think it's really positive. I think it's really positive. I think it can go the other way, but I think a lot of people get lost in the form or the apparent reality of hip hop. Like when people rap about having things, the like to my eye, the actual point of rapping about having things was because the system was set up so that they wouldn't have things, and yet they prevail by and they exhibit that by having those things and displaying those things.
Mm.
If you
Mm.
abstract that essence from it and it's just about having things, it's just dumb. It's
Yeah.
just about having
Yeah.
stuff. But some people, of course, always miss this essence, and they copy the
Yeah.
form, and then it's just meaninglessness. It's stupidity.
Yeah.
But we're
Yeah.
blessed in this country to have a few people who are just absolute poets, speaking from absolute essence with total honesty and shedding a lot of light on their experience, and therefore, you know, validating other people's experience and bringing everyone up, including themselves.
Mm. I wanted to ask you about kind of the experience of creativity and kind of facing your fear. Um, I think a lot of people would like to do more creative things, but when they start attempting to, fear takes over. A fear
Mm.
of either, oh no, this is shit, or I can't reveal this. I can't be vulnerable about this.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that kind of fear? You don't seem like have a lot of that fear in you, or have you just dealt with it well?
I think anytime you're stepping into the unknown, where you can be good or bad or be judged, um, and where you don't know if you can do it, but you're going to try, all of those experiences are scary. So, my first experience producing, where I had like just gotten this basic gear, and I'm in the room and the band shows up, and this band is like older than me, 6 or 7 years older. A lot of these people, some people 15, 20 years older than me in the band, and they've maybe done 20 or 30 records with different, session musicians. Like, and they're asking me questions like, can you do this? Can you do that? And I'm like just chancing it. Like I'm just trying something. You know what I mean? Like I'm like not really sure if I can do it, but I'm gonna try. Yeah, but you're on edge, and you're totally nervous, and it's not a comfortable situation. It's deeply uncomfortable situation until it's over, or something doesn't work, and you don't know how to fix it because you're so new at it. Could be just some button somewhere, but you don't know it yet. So that's scary. You just got to go through it, and you get better every time. That discomfort makes you learn. There's just other opportunities where it's like, hey, let's go to the session, and you can be on the song if you come up with something now. And I've been
Oh
in,
shit!
in a room with a couple of hip hop producers, gold record hip hop producers, and they put a mic, and then I got to do something, and then lo and behold, most of the time something good comes, but like you've no idea what's coming, and so it's just, I think just people just go for it. Sometimes it's not there, but like it's no real big loss if nothing happens. So you can just go for it, and you learn something every time you try. I think that's the thing. It's like I think the cure for it is to try and to have no expectations, but to have a goal. To have a goal, don't expect to get it, but try to get it, and then just reflect on it after. And if you take that attitude and accept that losing and failing is how you get to being able to be good at it. It's just like take all the pressure off it and do it for its own sake. Try it for its own sake, and lean into the experience of actually doing it if you can, like how it actually feels. Slow down and just experience it, and it'll probably get a lot easier. And then just keep doing it, keep trying it. You know, you've got permission to fail thousands of times, so it's no problem.
Yeah. Have Does a moment come to mind if you think of a moment that you fell on your face? Does anything spring to mind where?
um, oh yeah, yeah, a few times. You just been on. I mean, in that situation, let me check. You mean like that? You just nothing's coming kind of thing, or can you tell me what you mean?
Yeah, I'm picturing like you were saying. Say you're there with a producer, and they go, "All right, and your turn. Let's see what you've got." Have you ever experienced a moment where it's like you just went for it, and then you just felt like, "Oh no, shit, that was woeful," or just something like that. I'm just curious because you're such a kind of calm and confident guy. I'm just curious to hear. I think it would be reassuring to people watching you to go, even this dude who seems so on top of it, um, can have moments like that.
Um, I mean, maybe I'm forgetting them then to block it out. I've definitely had some times where like I was really feeling a vibe, and then I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna absolutely go for this," and then I listen back the next day, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, that was a bit fresh, what I was doing there." And at the time, be like, this is my best ever work." And then the next day, I listen and be like, "Oh, that's very funny." Um, Let me think of another example. Um, I don't know, man. Yeah, maybe I blocked out some of those things. I've definitely just been in a situation where I don't know, thought I could get something to work, tried it, didn't work. It's no big deal though. It's like none of those things are really that bad ever. People just move on. It's not like everybody's looking for that. People all wanna, you know,
Yeah,
it's not that dramatic. If you go try something that's awful, people are like, yeah, I don't really feel that, man. It's not, they're not gonna, you know, people respect you when you try. So someone would have to be very disturbed to really go in on you for trying something and it not working out. They're probably more likely to go,
mm,
yeah, no, I'm not really feeling that. I don't know if that's the thing. And then if you've
yeah,
got any sense and you've got any awareness, you'll be like, yeah, that's fine. And then you move on.
yeah.
But you might think later, like, why did that work or why did that not work? But none of it's that big a deal. We're all just trying stuff. None of us really know what's going on. You know what I mean?
Here, here. It takes longer for some of us to realize that. I think the penny drops at some point. You're like nobody has a clue what they're doing.
Nobody has a clue.
everybody's
Yeah, and it's
everybody's
infinite.
blagging.
Yeah, and yet you can still somehow know more and more. But
Yeah.
you always talk about, I always tell young bands, for example, about because we always have the illusion that we're getting better, right? We're getting better all the time, but we're also just getting different. Because if you look at a band, let's say I like the Arctic Monkeys, and the songs that they were doing when they're 17 are really good, you know and then they obviously all become better musicians because like since then, probably every 3 years or 4 or 5 years, they put in another 10,000 hours of dedicated practice, work with the best people in the world, glean their skills. you know they have access to every resource to just keep on becoming better, and then the second album is just also great. You know what I mean? But is it a better are they so much better? You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's very questionable. So it's cool to just value trying at whatever stage that you're at currently, because it might be a lot better than you think. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it could just be the best thing that you're gonna do, or the worst, and you've no real control over that. It's a channeling process. I think.
Yeah, it's not really helpful to think about things in terms of good or bad as an
Yeah.
artist, is it? Like when I was in drama school, there was a brilliant project we did called Autocore, run by this teacher John Baxter, and it was basically each person would have to make a 15-minute piece about absolutely anything they wanted. They could do whatever they wanted, but they had to use like found text. You
Mm,
couldn't write stuff. You had to take your text from other places. So people did like wildly different stuff, and it was a really creative thing. But he used to, after we watched people's pieces, he would say to the group, he'd go, okay, now we're going to talk about it, but you can't say that was good, that was bad, I liked it, or I didn't like it. You can only say, this made me feel whatever. It made me
oh,
feel this, it made me feel that. And I realized the effect of that was that you might watch something and you're used to thinking in terms of good and bad, and you'd watch it and you go, oh, this is shit. But if you didn't allow yourself to say that, and instead you just like, it made me feel like it made me feel angry, or it made me feel frustrated or something, you'd start to realize there was more value and kind of detail to something that you could have just dismissed as shit. You know?
mm. It also kind of is a connecting process. You have to reconnect to yourself, rather than just some ideas. If you
Mm.
focus on how made you feel, you have to check how you feel, uh, which is essentially an awareness exercise. How do I feel now in response to that? rather than the mind has a tendency to go, what should my opinion of this be, in a way, like subconsciously, of course. But that's a great process. Yeah. How does that make me feel? Yeah. And then that's really, that goes more straight then to the intention of the piece, and was the intention successful? Because most
Mm,
people shouldn't have the goal that when they do something well, that people think it's good. In my opinion, it should be more, if I'm successful, they will feel something like this, you know?
mm. Yeah. Speaking of what you feel, I'm always curious to ask performers, particularly about the experience of performing. When you're playing in the good old days when you could play gigs. I don't know if that's still possible or if it has been possible during the year of the pandemic for you. But um, when you are playing gigs to good crowds, what does that feel like internally for you?
Um, it's cool. It's cool. It's a nice feeling. I mean, like I still think, and this is just where I'm at, but I, I feel like I'm at stage two of whatever I'm going to do live, so I've had a bunch of experience, and I've played to actually pretty big crowds and all that sort of stuff. But it's always felt a bit like moving towards something, and I know that's a real common illusion, but I actually just don't feel like I've done what I want to do live yet. As in, like I haven't uh, put together the show in the way that I want to do it. So how does it feel? It feels good. It feels good, but it's also kind of felt like playing or experimenting or exploring or testing in a way, training in a way. You know what I mean? As in, like, you play some stuff where I went on tour a year and a half ago with this artist I was producing called Kid Simius, and it's all sold out shows all around Germany and some in Austria and Switzerland and stuff, and super cool, like really cool experience. And you go on, and it's just these packed clubs, and people really, have a lot of energy, and they're very reactive. And then it's also sometimes, if you've got quite delicate vocal parts, it's quite hard. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
you're enjoying it, but you're also kind of trying to execute something quite difficult in an environment that's very loud and actually kind of hard to hear yourself. So it's like it's challenging, and I've also played in so many different things that I really think I have a sense somehow that, like, once I create my new live show, which I'm working on at the moment, and then I get to do it kind of again and again and iterate it. I'm looking forward to that, because I think that will be that will be something I can really, really take in 100%. But no, what's the short answer? The short answer is it's amazing. Like, when you're feeling good and you're feeling comfortable and the crowd is feeling good, it's amazing. It's like a massive flow of energy. You're kind of like giving a lot to them, they're giving a lot to you. Um, and that's great. It's a wonderful feeling.
can you let us in on any preview of what the live show you're working on, or is that a tightly held secret for the time being?
No, it's not that tightly held. I mean, like, I'll tell you, it's I'm trying to bring together all my worlds. That's kind of my goal. So my concept is that I'm gonna start with a meditation, with a guided meditation. So with music, but a guided meditation, and just get people totally in touch with their body, with their listening, with their presence. And then it's gonna become a concert, and then it's gonna become a dance show or dance concert. You know what I mean? So electronic music concert. So it's gonna flow from a very sort of welcoming and conscious consciousness elevating experience into songs, into like a concert, and then into like electronic music, so you can just dance, and so
That
that's what I'm
sounds
working
brilliant, man.
on. Yeah, that's what I'm working on. I'm excited by it, man. I got all the stuff
I
delivered to Kilfnora that I need to use in the show, so I'm just I'm going to be putting that together over the next probably month or two. See how we go.
Especially in the times we're living in, it sounds like exactly what people need right now.
Yeah, I think so too, man. Yeah,
It
I
reminds me a
think
little
so too.
bit. We at the beginning of the chat we mentioned the hippies of Clare, and I don't mean that
Mm,
in any kind of pejorative way because I count many of them as friends, and I actually
yeah.
went to a festival. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Earth Song, and it's
Mm.
a
I've heard
lot
of
of
this festival.
a lot of the East Clare residents go to it, and there's like no phones and no drink for 10 days, and it's a kind of like a retreat. It's really good actually. Um,
Oh,
a lot of anyway.
okay.
And
Good.
you just reminded me of there was a part of it which was five rhythms, but
Yeah.
it was all using like acoustic instrument drums and acoustic string instruments and so on, and it built up like that. It built
Mm,
from a kind of meditative state to a bit a bit kind of more energetic, and then eventually in kind of pretty dim light with like some flame around and stuff. It was like really intense. And I remember seeing there was like in front of me there was this guy who was like 50 who looked, had kind of like the body of like a stocky farmer who was like just it half naked just in his shorts, and then a few feet away from him was a girl who was probably like 21, similarly like in bra or whatever, and both of them just dancing and really kind of getting lost
good.
in it. um
Gorgeous.
yeah, and it really was. And when you describe that kind of gig, you know you're now an established musician, and I'm not aware of that being a thing that an established musician like you, who could easily just rock up and do a 2 hour set of your well known tunes, taking the time to do something like that, which is more like an experience. That sounds unusual. And again, another kind of brave move.
Yeah, I just try to do what's exciting for me, um, and then that's the kind of simple version of it, as in, yeah, I really believe in just following what's exciting. I was gonna do a tour for my album, and it just all got cancelled, kind of never to be put back on because of it was right at the beginning of COVID, and so it's just 1.5 years later. I just don't know if I relate anymore to doing an album release show. You know what I mean? I just like
Mm,
moving on and being where I am now, and so if I think about it, I'm like, nah, none of that really appeals to me that much. This appeals to me a lot. This would be exciting for me to work on, and I kind of need to think it's going to be really cool and exciting for me to put all the effort in. You know, to
mm,
really try and make something cool.
mm.
But yeah, I think it's gonna be
Yeah,
fun.
I think so. And I won't keep you too much longer, but just so the listener knows, what is your most recent album called?
My debut album, I suppose, is called The Journey to Zero, and I released it first as Delush, which was the stage name that I was using for a while, and then I re-released it under my own name earlier this year. And then the current EP that I'm working on that has two songs out is called Liberation.
To finish off, to bring us back to the gallery connection,
Yeah.
how are your family reacting now that you've been through all this journey? And I gather it was just kind of scary for your parents and stuff when you went into music. What's the kind of feeling in your family now with the way it's all going?
They're very supportive, you know. Yeah, and I'm sure for any parent, it's like it's one of the worst careers.
Mm,
It's unbelievably hard to make it work. Crazy. Um,
mm,
phenomenally hard. So, fair enough, like but I'm sure they're happy with it. Like I'm sure it probably gives them a bit of reassurance that I'm not insane. And that's just nice.
helps
It's
every
just
now and then.
nice to see. I'd say it's just nice for them to see good things happening and recognition happening, and yeah, just good things. It's good things. If I had kids, I'd want to see them doing well after many, many, many years of going for it. You know, so it's all
Yeah.
good. It's all good. Yeah. And they've kindly
Um,
let me use this house for my productions for the last few months, so that's also very beautiful.
and you've built a studio there.
Yeah, yeah. I've brought a lot of gear, and I work with that. Um, these days, like, technology is kind of amazing. So it's like if you've got a series of great microphones and a few great pieces of hardware, um, and a few great instruments, you're well on your way. You know,
It's kind of democratized creativity.
I mean, to get the really good stuff, which I like to do, is still very expensive. But it's democratized it somewhat. Yeah, it makes it a lot easier to just start. So
Mm,
it's a great time. Whatever I'm doing now would have cost 10 times more in the 50s,
yeah.
60s. So
Um,
yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting.
well, it was very cool to meet you. I was just thinking, the galleries are quite a small. There's not many galleries in Ireland or in the world. Indeed, I've met very few throughout my life, and in terms of like the kind of wider family, I've never been aware of anyone else who worked in the arts. And it was actually, I met your dad briefly at my dad's funeral, and we shook hands, and I had
Mm.
mentioned being an actor, like in the eulogy for my dad, and he kind of, said a few words to me about that, but he told me about another relative called Tom Gallery, who was an actor in Hollywood, who's like part of an
Ah,
American branch of the family, who
I
married.
never this, dude.
You didn't know about that? Yeah, I didn't either. But you can look him up on Wikipedia. He married the actor Zazu Pitts, I think her name was,
All right.
who is pretty famous.
Didn't
So,
also have a guy now.
yeah, so he was the only other kind of like creative gallery I knew about. And it's a pleasure to meet another one in yourself, and it's
Yeah,
brilliant that you're,
was pleasure, man.
yeah. So fair play, and I think the listeners of the podcast will find this an inspiring one.
That's cool, man.
So
It was a
thanks
pleasure,
a
man.
million.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thanks for having me on, and yeah, great to connect. And give me a shout if you're down in Clare, and I'll do the
Absolutely.
same if I'm in London.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, yeah, it'd be good to have a pint, do it in real life.
Sounds good. Sounds good, man.
That was my interview with Enda. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have an unusual life story or know someone who does, please get in touch with me by email at patspodcastpeople@gmail.com. If you enjoy the podcast and think it's a worthwhile venture, you can support it on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Pat's podcast. It will help me invest more time in the podcast and find more interesting stories. Alternatively, you could leave a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Any of the above would be greatly appreciated. You can find me on Twitter. It's at Pat's Podcast. I have an exciting guest lined up for 2 weeks' time, which I won't reveal yet, so watch this space. Thanks for listening or watching.